right now.
All right, so let's call to order the City Commission special work session for March 11th, 2021. We'll do a quick roll call.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Present.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith,
Here.
and Commission President Rocky Smith.
I'm here finally, thank you. So our first discussion item tonight is number one, Oregon City Operations Complex project. John Lewis.
You're muted, John.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Commission President Rocky Smith and Commissioners. I feel a little bit sheepish tonight for having you at a Thursday meeting, but I appreciate you taking the time to listen to both these topics. So with that, we'll get through as quickly as we can. I'm going to turn this over quickly to Jerry Mulrooney, who's with Plan B Consultancy, and Vance Walker, who's the Assistant Public Works Director. They're going to do the presentation for the operations complex tonight. I just want to acknowledge we've got Brennan Dole with Scott Edwards and Associates, our architect, and we've got Sam Egger, who's also with Plan B on the call as well. So that's a big part of our project team. I don't see anybody from the contractor on this call right now, but really, again, we appreciate you taking the time to listen to this. I guess, I don't know if Jerry's going to make the invitation, but we are starting to see things that are looking more like walls and floors and things like that in the building. So I just want to extend that invitation. I know, Denise, you've been bugging me about wanting to do that, and I want to do that. So we'll arrange that. So I'll just open that up for you for sure. And then Jerry, I think you can share your screen, I'm hoping.
Yes. Good evening. Can you all hear and see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you, John. Good evening, commissioners. It's good to see you all again. For the next 10 minutes or so, we're going to give you a project update. It's been about 4 months, I think, since we've sat in front of you guys and presented the GMP. It's probably a little bit longer, actually. A lot of things have changed over the course of that time, and we're going to talk you through those changes, both in terms of schedule, budget, and also we've got some good graphics and pictures to show you. The folks who haven't managed to make it out onto site, as John alluded to earlier, we have an open invitation for you folks whenever you want to come out and see progress. I'll touch on that towards the end of the presentation as well. But for the next few moments, just going to do a quick project overview, talk about the key events that have happened over the last number of months, construction progress to date, our timelines, and I'll touch a little bit on our budget status as well, before final up with next steps and any questions that you may have. So I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with this site now at this stage. We've talked plenty of times over the last year, and so development team, myself with Plan B, Sam on the call, Brandon and team from Scott Edwards Architecture, and Emmerich, our construction professionals. We're supporting Denise, Vance, and John on the team, and also Frank has been a key component up to us starting construction on site as part of the design. So again, quickly, I'll go through this. This is our footprint of the building on the left-hand side in the yellow blocks. That's our new office spaces. The gap in the middle is effectively our drive aisles and our connection between both buildings. And finally, the warehouse area, the main chunk that you see there that we're redeveloping in this area here in particular. The old storage areas as well, we've kept and turned them into to space for use. This is the one component of the building that we're not touching under this project. So just to kind of refresh from where what's changed over the last number of months. In September, we commenced our demolition of the project. This is a good kind of picture here you see of the front of the building on the west side that was dropped and has been exposed. Our building permit was issued in November for full construction. Our site work and framing has been major progress over the last number of months, across the winter in particularly. We've been pretty fortunate not to have been too impacted by the weather. However, we've had some issues with not only the fires towards the end of last year, but also the most recent ice storms. And I'll touch a little bit on that on the scheduled portion. Big kind of issues we've had to deal with is our utility providers, PGE. We've managed to overcome and have a design approved, which has been tremendous. It's been really early in the process and has helped the project tremendously. And as well as recent OSHA state guidelines on COVID-19 measures, we've had to implement additional safety protocols with the contractor on site. And again, I'll touch more on that when I come to the budget. I've included some photographs just to kind of chart progress. We have a lot more than the 15 or so that I'm going to show here. We have actually thousands of pictures documenting pretty much every day of progress. On the left-hand side, you'll see what kind of started in September, October time, initial demolition. You'll remember there was 2 annexes on the front of the buildings. We completely stripped back and exposed the bare structure. Then into the November, when we're starting to get into the wetter months, again, you'll see the kind of areas we've enclosed here. Site area prep, both on sides of the building and down the left-hand side of the building as well. There's another couple of pictures coming up that'll show that better. This is on the, if you're standing in front of the building to the right-hand side or the east wing, you'll see in December that we were excavating and starting to put in our formwork and our rebar ahead of concrete pour to build this whole structure back up. And if I'm moving too fast, please stop me. Inside the building, it's been completely gutted out. You will not recognize the old building at all. Everything has been removed. This is a good picture to show the extent of excavation work that the contractor had to undertake inside the building, which is not easy. It's never easy when you're working in an existing building with a roof on it. This is looking back out towards that opening to the front of the building. This again is the east side where we poured our concrete, about to pour concrete at this stage, and the prep that was involved. And this photograph here actually shows concrete pour in the warehouse area where we've placed all our sanitary lines running north on the site. This is the number of guys here actually bringing concrete pour in from outside the building. We've reversed trucks back up in order to make that happen. So complexities of an existing building, working inside an existing building are on full show. Again, another picture here of concrete pour. This is in the main office, future main office space. We've started in February framing out the warehouse. This will be the new office space on plan on left. Timber framing happening here. And this is a good example on the west side of the building where we had all our new openings punctured through, and we've sealed them all up for protection elements. You'll see the 2 units on both of on the building that were placed as well. That was all happening in February, and again, more site work. And then into March, this is, we all kind of refer to what I do, and particularly as the dance floor. This is the first floor structure going back into the main office space after we've been building back up with the concrete pours. This is a good example of our ductwork going in. So you'll see that the mechanical and plumbing trades are on site working ahead. And finally, this is a good picture of what we've had to deal with in terms of the utilities. Just for scale, I think that guy is about 5'9". So this is quite a chunk of concrete that was formed and poured in order to bring all our utilities into one central point and then loaded off into the building and elsewhere. So project timelines, we are almost halfway through the construction build. This red line delineates where we are. Construction anticipated to end at the end of September, beginning of October per the contract. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we come across two somewhat delays with the fires towards the end of last year, and also most recently the ice storms. We are working diligently with the contractor to make sure that every avenue is exhausted, to make sure that we hit our contract agreed date. We still have some time to make up, but you can see that we still have a good 6 months or so remaining on the construction side of things in order to achieve that. I'll highlight their furniture contract is coming in front of you folks Wednesday of next week for approval. That will be the last major component that comes across your desks for signature in order for us to move forward and wrap up the last of the main contracts. So just again, what's happening over the next number of months. This month, towards the end of the month, we'll see the structural steel framing starting to come in. We'll see in April roof works, the siding actually going on the sides of the building, you'll see that. The balance of the mechanical equipment is due to come in before we start buttoning up the front of the building. Over the course of May and June, better weather, continuing the roof works. We'll see our internal walls for both the office space and the warehouse space start to form and get completed, along with our mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems. That's the smaller pipe work and wire that will run throughout the building. In July, we're going to see our elevator arrive. That'll be pretty exciting. Elevator suppliers are notorious for delaying projects, so contractors been working really closely with them to make sure that that's hit in July. Into August then, the worst of the structure is put back together. So we'll see the finishes starting to come together, painting, windows getting installed. The building will be pretty much wind and watertight at that stage. Doors as well, we'll start to see coming in. And then September, we'll see our big overhead doors on the left and right hand side of the building looking on plan. Or sorry, looking at it from the street, along with the hardware, signage, and then the balancing and testing as the final kind of major aspects of the project. It's just a good picture there of that's looking in from the street into the front of the building. This will be the main entrance. So you can see there's a lot of support going on here. This is our elevator shaft. The building, this will be all the glass frontage that runs along the front of the building. So good example of progress to date there. On our budget, we're looking really good actually. Our 12.8 million, 10.18 was the construction GMP, as well as contingency number. We had $900,000 construction contingency as part of that. No change there. There's no change on the other numbers that you guys have seen before in order to get us to our number. Just wanted to focus a little bit on construction contingency spend to date. The COVID monitoring that I mentioned earlier was an unforeseen and unknown additional mandate from the state towards October, November time of last year. So effectively what that meant was that the contractor had to place one person on the entry gates to the site every morning, checking every subcontractor and every person that arrived onto site. So we've identified that as a risk to the contingency and put a dollar value accordingly against it. It's quite high, so you know, but it's something that we have to follow. So hopefully if things change on the COVID front over the next number of months, we'll see that number start to peel back, and it will go back into our contingency pot. We ran into some unknown ground conditions. Typically with a brownfield site, you're going to run into two issues similar to what we had at the PD. We ran into septic tanks. We ran into sanitary and storm lines, the existing storm lines and existing sanitary lines. Ran into issues there. The worst of that is behind us now. The dollar value associated with all those changes was quite significant, but in the grand scheme versus our $900,000 contingency, 22 or 23% is not too bad. As I say, the worst of it is over. We're out of the ground and moving up. We shouldn't see any more of those kind of impacts. And then finally, design development, just because I like to give Brandon a hard time sometimes, but it's been really good today. So small changes in the stem walls. We found some concrete that no one was expecting to find right in the middle of where we're putting our new walls. So there was a number of small dollar costs impacts to that, but as always, they all add up. So we're kind of trending to around 50K on the design development. But overall, with 6 months to go, halfway through the contract, the construction contract, and we still have about 500K contingency left, construction contingency. So kind of next steps for us as a team, we held an employee advisory update today. We talked through all the forthcoming next steps and processes with the staff, kind of give them an update on progress, the floor plans, the furniture packages, and what they're expecting to see over the next couple of months. We also showed them the same finishes palette that we showed to you guys back towards the end of last year. That happened today. As I mentioned earlier, next week we're in front of you for the furniture package. It's trending on budget right now. It's very similar systems and same provider that we used on the PD. So we maximized as much as we could from those contracts that we had in play. Then into April, we're looking to conclude the last of our third-party contracts, which is the security and the access controls, as well as the IT-related issues. So that's our phones and our network and our Wi-Fi. The latter of these things are not in the contractor's contract. This was always on us as a third party to supply these contracts through the city. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I went through that pretty fast, but happy to take any questions or any comments that you have.
All right, questions or comments from the commission? Yeah. See if I can see everybody here. Commissioner McGriff.
Yeah, I was going to say thank you for the presentation, and it's pretty straightforward. I have been driving by probably 2 or 3 times a week just because I go to the post office and I can take the long way. So looks like it's making good progress, and thank you for keeping everything on track and on budget.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Let me look here. I actually wasn't going to say anything other than to say the key words to us are it's at or under budget, and it's minor delays caused by some of the things we experienced. And I know that if we should run into any cost adjustments, that we're always free to withdraw some of the amenities from John Lewis's office. So we're good.
Already been done, Frank. Already been done.
You're my hero.
You're also invited, Frank. You know, we haven't seen you in a while out there. You come to our weekly OAC meetings.
Well, you know, I don't want to micromanage a project. That's what staff for, and that's what consultants are for. And obviously it's plugging along very well without my input. So just keep on keeping on. Thanks.
So I have not driven by the site in a while, and so I'm actually really surprised at how much work has been done. I'm so excited about this. I'm gonna start driving by now a little bit more because the pictures say a lot. And you know, I think the last time we were in the building was when we broke ground, and so I'm anxious to see inside the building. And I gotta say that you know, as you know, I've been on the commission a long time. The amount that this city has accomplished, and I think sometimes we feel like we get overwhelmed and we get behind and we have a huge list of things on our plate. But if you look at the things that this city has accomplished in the last 5 to 10 years, it's absolutely unbelievable. You know, we've gone through most of the history of this city without replacing some of our buildings. And we have replaced almost every building or renovated. We've got police and library and city hall, and now we're dealing with parks and public works. And I don't think that 10 years ago imagined that was ever going to be possible, that would happen in this amount of time. It's been a lot of work, and it's been a lot of dedication by a lot of people, including our staff and people that, quite frankly, didn't give up and kind of waited, for us to cycle through every single building and all the needs that this city had and the financial issues this city has had in the past 20 years. It's really unbelievable to see where we're at. And this is just another amazing project that I think, 10, 20 years from now, we're still going to be proud of. And this will kind of allow our city to continue to grow and for us to not worry about our major facilities for quite some time. So, and maybe most of our lifetimes. So I just appreciate everyone's work on this, and I can't wait to see it. Commissioner Lousmith, did you have something?
No, I think it looks good. I've driven by there a couple times, so I've been kind of monitoring the progress. So I like to see the work happening. So yeah, I'm like Frank at this point. I'm trusting that you guys are managing it and doing it well. And if it starts running off the rails, you'll let us know. And otherwise, good job.
Thank you.
Commissioner McGriff, did you have anything else to add? Okay. All right. Thank you so much. We'll look forward to the next report at our next meeting, or the furniture. I was already scrolling through some of the photographs of the office furniture and stuff, so that's cool.
Okay, thank you. As always, I just want to publicly acknowledge that the team, Brandon and Manny at Scott Edwards, doing a tremendous job. Bill, Jordan, George, and Tyler, our contractors at Emmerich. Sam, our PM here with Plan B, doing a tremendous job, and also John, Vance, and Denise have been tremendous. We've been posing them a lot of questions to them, and they've been very, very supportive and responsive. So, as well as the city staff. So it's going really well. We've got a good collective group, and yeah, look forward to the next update as well.
Very good.
For your
Thank you
time.
All right, that brings us to number 2 on the agenda, storm water rates and system development charges. John Lewis.
Again, I'm gonna start the presentation, but I just want to acknowledge Bob Balgos, who's our project engineer and overseeing really the completion of the stormwater master plan and then the rate and SDC study. So FCS Group worked with Bob to put together a presentation, which I think they're going to open. So that, John, I think you've got the ability to share your screen, and I'm going to cover the first 5 slides, but just want to acknowledge again John Gillarducci, who's president with FCS Group, and Brooke, who's a project manager, who's probably doing all the tough work, and John's just takes all the credit for that. And, so we'll hear from both of them today. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to cover the background, and then the rest of the pieces, some of which you've seen. The SDC methodology is relatively similar to what we have shared with water, and this group is getting pretty seasoned with regard to SDCs for sure, and then stormwater rates, and so they will go through that. And we've got a couple of scenarios that you might not be as familiar with, especially with regard to the idea of a debt funding alternative. So we'll see that as well. Next slide, please. So we completed our stormwater master plan in 2020, but prior to that, we hadn't done one since 1988. And, these master plans, in theory, we'd like to get them done every 10 years. Stormwater has lagged because it's kind of the last child, if you will. And we've done, in place of not doing master plans, some of our growth areas in South End and Caulfield, we did a couple of drainage master plans there. And of course, we've done 3 concept plans. I would say those concept plans didn't address a lot about stormwater. So, that didn't contribute a lot. But we started in 2016 kind of digging in a lot deeper with our stormwater master plan. And I guess aside from master planning, we also we've got a stormwater permit and stormwater, what we call a surface water management plan, which is different than a stormwater master plan. And then there's annual reports. So there is a lot of work that goes into the stormwater program, but the master plan had, it's been too long. So we've got that adopted. We're moving forward with that plan, and the rate and SDC study builds upon the master plan. Next slide, please. So for stormwater, our systems are a little simpler than our water systems and our sewer systems and our transportation systems. In Oregon City, I think we're unique in that we've got 15 or 16 different drainage basins across the city, some of which drain to the Willamette River, some drain to the Clackamas River, some drain out towards Canby, and that eventually get to the Willamette River as well, but they go out kind of our southwest end of town. And then we've got other things that, again, still go to the Willamette, but they go out the east side of town. So we're unique that way. And in that, our projects are, I would say, while some of them are big projects, we've got projects that are smaller in the sense of smaller pipe sizes. And I would say for the most part, our project list focused pretty squarely on our existing neighborhoods. A lot of our stormwater system used to be a combined system. And we built sewer systems around it, but we lived with that old combined system for our stormwater system. So a lot of old pipe systems through a lot of established neighborhoods. And I say that because most of the capital plan serves our existing customers. So what John will share with you is our rate and SDC outcomes. But on the SDC side, unlike water, there's not a lot of project for new construction. Most of those new concept areas, Beaver Creek, Park Place, and South End, they're going to have their drainage systems, but for the most part, they're smaller drainage systems that are going to be built out by the development community as a development condition, as opposed to as like a water line where you need, or a water system where you need a reservoir that serves, that development, or you need transmission mains that move the water for that new development. In this case, these are, projects that are in the drainage basin. They're smaller, shorter basins that daylight to existing tributaries to the Willamette and Clackamas River, Abernathy Creek, Mud Creek. So it's mostly a capital project list out of the master plan that we've landed on. It does have recommendations for capital as well. Maintenance as well. Next slide, please. Just a reminder, this is a current goal. We hope to accomplish this so it doesn't have to remain on your current goals to get through the master plan, get through the capital improvement plan, and complete the rate and SDC study, and then get to adoption of those recommendations as well. So with that, I'm not sure if it's Brooke or John that's going to take over from here, but welcome, FCS Group.
Thank you, John. And I will walk through the system development charge work, and then Brooke will take us through the rate results. And thank you, Commission President and commissioners. One of the features of system development charges is they help you recover the cost of growth-related capital projects from growth. And so it's a perfect segue from the capital plan into system development charges. And you can go to the next slide, please, Brooke. So you'll recognize the math from just a couple of nights ago when we were talking about water. We will have a reimbursement fee for stormwater based on unused capacity in the existing system, and then we'll be dividing that by growth We will, based on that list of capital projects you saw a couple of slides ago, also be developing an improvement fee based on the small amount of the small portion of those projects that will serve growth. As John mentioned, most of it is correcting existing deficiencies and meeting current needs, but we will divide that by projected growth in the city, and together those will equal the system development charge. So growth, unlike with the water system, the growth in our denominator for both of these calculations is growth in impervious surface area as well as we can project it. So it's growth in developed area inside the city only. And we express that impervious surface area as a number of equivalent service units. And an equivalent service unit, or ESU, is the average amount of impervious surface area on a single family residence in Oregon City. So basically these are residential equivalents. So we've analyzed the city's current customer data and projected that growth using the housing needs analysis. And our resulting growth is shown on the next slide. 2,406 equivalent service units for basically the next 20 years are expected in the city from 2020 through 2039. So that 2,406 ESUs will be our denominator in the fee calculations. So the next step is to identify the cost of unused capacity in the existing system. And there is a little bit looking at recently added infrastructure. We were able to identify some unused capacity. That dollar amount shown on the next slide. About $1.3 million of, almost 9 million of eligible assets. We think the system is cost more than that. This is just what we know and the unused capacity estimate. So for that improvement fee, which is on the next slide, here the pie is the capital plan, that list of planned capital projects. And of that, the portion of each, which is capacity increasing to meet the needs of future customers or growth, is a remarkably similar number to the reimbursement fee. But you'll see we have total project costs of almost $23 million. Only less than 6% of that is capacity increasing to meet the needs of growth. So we're at about 1.3 million as our improvement fee basis as well. And the rest of that will be, as I mentioned, to correct existing deficiencies and meet current needs. So the calculation summary is shown here. That 1.3 million of unused capacity in the reimbursement fee basis divided by growth in EDUs yields a reimbursement fee of, as you see there, $533 per equivalent unit. And then for the improvement fee, the other $1.3 million divided by growth yields an improvement fee of $536. Together, that's a system development charge of $1,070 per equivalent unit. So the good news, unlike the water results that you saw last week, this is a very modest increase over the city's current charge, which is $956 per equivalent unit. That the calculated charge, which we just went through, results in a maximum of $1,070 per equivalent unit. So the recommendation is to move forward with that calculated stormwater SDC. There's a public hearing required to adopt that number. And because of the 90-day notice period, there's a targeted public hearing date of July 7th for that action. So the proposal is to issue that notice, identifying that date, and then we will have the methodology report to you and available to the public for the required 60 days at least prior to that public hearing. Okay, now any questions about the system development charges before we move into the rates?
Yeah.
Commissioner O'Donnell, was that you?
Yes, I was just looking for the unmute button. So I want to be careful on terminology and the use of SDCs. You said SDCs also correct existing deficiencies. When you say that, are you talking about it's deficient only in that it cannot serve the new growth, or it's deficient in serving its existing customers?
So sorry, SDCs actually can't be used to correct existing deficiencies.
I know that.
So okay, sorry. So when I say that that some of those projects are required to meet existing deficiencies, all that means is there may not be enough capacity in some of those locations to meet existing demands, existing runoff generated by the current customers. And so only the portion that is upsizing those to meet the needs of growth is includable.
Understood. And I understood that. I just wanted to
sorry.
be clear for anybody that was watching that we're
Gotcha.
not, SDCs are very limited in their application. And if there are existing deficiencies in that portion of the infrastructure that serves existing customers, those improvements would be financed, I presume, through rate increases or some other means, and not SDCs.
That's exactly right. The one exception to that is you have some flexibility with the reimbursement fee portion of the SDC. That money does not have to be spent on capacity increasing capital. That can be spent on any stormwater capital projects. So that will provide a modest revenue stream that could be used for that, but rates will be needed to pick up the bulk of the project costs.
And the rest of it is just about how the calculation is made. I'll ask a simpler question. If SDCs were collected for a project in, say, Park Place, are they allowed to be used in like South End or some other neighborhood? Or are they?
Yes, they are.
They are.
Yes.
And I asked that for the benefit of anybody watching also. So you had a table 5, and I didn't understand all the terminology. So there was a totally adopted capital improvement program. What less the existing deficiency share of these? What is a deficiency share? I didn't understand the term.
So that's probably not the best language to use, but that is the portion of the project list which is not growth related and is meeting existing needs. So that's the part that we can't include and we deduct from the charge calculation.
Okay, that makes more sense to me than the terminology. And then if there's an existing SDC fund balance, regardless of where it exists, is it applied to this project, regardless of the geography of the project?
So an existing fund balance can be spent on any project. If it's improvement fee, it can be spent on any of the growth related portions of the projects without regard to where they are or where that money was collected.
And I understand that trying to avoid a double count, but I mean, just say I had $100,000 set aside or in the fund for a project in Park Place, and then I do something on South End. If I apply that money to the South End project, what happens to the ability to complete the project in Park Place?
SDCs are that's a cash flow. We view that as a cash flow issue. So as system development charges come in, they're not earmarked for specific projects. So you use the full buying power of system development charges as they come in on the capital plan as the city prioritizes those projects. So whatever project is first, that may leave less money for the remaining projects, and you have to wait as growth occurs and years go by to generate the funds to do the next project, unless you rate fund it and then reimburse the ratepayers with the system development charges.
Okay, I just wanted that to be clear because that's a subtraction from the liability due from somebody building from the current SDC. They get credit for money in the fund, even though it's it's not really specific to their project. So,
That's right.
all right, thank you.
All right, any other questions, or you're gonna go on to the rates, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll take it over from here. And so at this point, we're really going to shift gears, as we mentioned, talk about the monthly rates now for the stormwater utility, and crafting that strategy to cover the financial obligations going forward. So first, we're going to set the stage by discussing some of the assumptions and the financial policies that guide this process. And so in order to forward-looking forecast, we really need to make a number of assumptions about the future. So for the stormwater utility, we use the fiscal year 2021 budget as the baseline for expenses, and we've increased those expenses by a number of inflationary factors that you see here. So 2% for salaries, 5% annually for benefits. The majority of other operating costs will increase by 2%, while construction cost escalation is shown as 3% annually. In terms of forecasting rate revenue, we're basing that off of the fiscal year 2020 year-end estimate and increasing that by an account growth rate of 0.5% annually. So that account growth rate really equates about 120 new equivalent units per year. And then we'll also be planning, as we've kind of mentioned in the very beginning, a few options for the use of debt to fund the capital program. And so in the assumptions where we've included those debt provisions, we'll be looking at using revenue bonds with a 20-year term and a 4% interest rate and a 1% issuance cost. So as I mentioned, also in order to kind of set this framework, we're going to talk about a few of the financial policies to help guide the decision-making going forward. The first is the operating reserve. So this is really in place to help us weather those cash flow fluctuations month to month, as our revenues don't always come in like our expenses have to go out. And so in order to set a target for that, for stormwater utilities, we usually have a little bit lower target than we see in water or sewer, for example, because there's not weather variations involved. So we're aiming for 45 days of O&M expenses on hand each year there. For a capital contingency reserve, this is in place to ensure that there's a cushion to absorb emergency repairs or project cost overruns, for example. A typical industry target for this is 1% of asset values, which in the case of the stormwater utility is just under $100,000, increasing to about $327 as we continue to add capital throughout the years. Next on this list, we have system reinvestment policy. This is really typically in place to help promote reinvestment in the system, encouraging that replacement and repair of assets as they depreciate through a rate provision. So as you can see, there's no funded system reinvestment policy that's incorporated, but the city does contribute cash to capital projects annually. The level will just vary depending on the rate strategy that we ultimately decide upon. And that means it'll fluctuate year to year with more of a passive approach. And then finally, we have debt service coverage. So this is typically related to staying in compliance with bond covenants, showing that you can cover an additional amount of debt service really over and above a planned amount of debt service. And so while the stormwater utility doesn't currently have debt, it may be important in the future if we're going to consider going to the bond market for debt issuances. So showing that we have a solid debt service coverage ratio can really help achieve the best terms in the market. So for this, we'll be aiming to achieve at least a minimum of a 1.25 coverage ratio in the scenarios where we're looking to issue debt. So with the review of the assumptions and the financial policies, we can jump into the main part of the analysis, which is the revenue requirement portion. When we talk about a revenue requirement, what we mean is that we'll be determining the overall amount of revenue that we need to satisfy all the financial obligations of the utility on a multi-year basis and on a standalone basis. So no subsidies from other utilities, of course. And those financial obligations that we'll be looking at are the more direct costs like operating expenses, any existing or future debt service, and any level of capital funded through rates. In addition to those, we'll also be considering those indirect costs, like I was just speaking of, those financial parameters like our debt service coverage and maintaining our balances and our reserve targets. Once those are direct and indirect costs are identified and understood, we can really test the revenue sufficiency of our existing rates over the coming years to determine if there needs to be some changes there. And if there is a need identified for rate changes, then we can develop that rate strategy to satisfy those deficiencies over a multi-year period. And the idea being there, of course, to try to minimize customer impacts to the extent possible.
Hey, Brooke.
Yeah.
Before you go too far, so the policy, sorry to interrupt, the two slides, the policy that was missing, the no formal policy incorporated. I don't want to forget my question, so I'm interrupting now. Sorry. I assume that there's not a recommendation from FCS to remedy that, or you feel like the way we're currently operating is sufficient. How does that compare to other cities, or is that, it looks your target is maybe reflecting actuality, and I'm just wondering if there's a recommendation to change that.
Yeah, ideally, we like to see that there is a target applied there. Often those are linked to very detailed asset management plans in the ideal world. In a substitution of that, sometimes we can see that linked to an annual depreciation amount or a calculation of replacement depreciation. So, looking forward, we would recommend that the city take a look at that and revisit it. It can add some pressure to rates. So noting that, we're coming off of a master plan here and trying to mitigate the impact to rates. Also recognizing that the city often does cash fund a lot of their capital anyway, and the majority of it in the past, that also really kind of leans towards a very strict rate funded provision anyway. But it would be something that the city can consider in the future, just to make sure that they're really keeping up with that repair and replacement line item and treating it like a true cost of doing business.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner O'Donnell, did you have a question still? Or?
No, I really didn't. I mean, it sounds like the concept is essentially like an escrow account to put the money away for that time when you need it. So either it's an escrow account or you handle it through the depreciation schedule, as Ms. Brooks said. So thanks.
I think his hand was up from earlier. There you go.
All right. So as we kind of move forward here, we crafted the revenue requirement discussion, like I was just kind of mentioning here, for consideration, and looked at a few different options, and ultimately also a couple different funding scenarios for each of these options. So first we have the baseline option, and in this scenario, as well as each subsequent scenario, the city is going to increase their maintenance program to meet minimum frequencies and support the engineering associated with the capital plan execution. In addition, each operating budget is going to include 2 new FTEs, 1 utility maintenance staff member and 1 stormwater engineer. Both of those plan to start in 2022. These operating costs that I just mentioned are going to remain the same in each of the 3 scenarios that we discuss. The differentiating element is the level of capital investment made. So in the baseline, the city planned to spend an average of $1.7 million annually, and this would be made up of $1.2 million on critical master plan projects and $500,000 critical maintenance needs. When we step up to the next level, what we're calling the moderate capital scenario, this capital budget would average $2.4 million in annual expenditures and allow the city to address the full master plan project with $1.6 million annually, as well as $800,000 aimed at tackling all critical maintenance with some additional maintenance there. And then finally, the full capital level of service is where the city would dedicate $3.2 million annually, really ensuring that the full master plan projects were executed at the same $1.6 million annually, but then they would add $1.6 million to address all known maintenance needs. So when we talk about critical maintenance, we're talking about addressing failing, aging infrastructure in need of immediate attention. So manholes and pipes, undersized storm utilities, outfall repairs, frequent maintenance needs, and some of those unplanned urgent major maintenance needs. When we talk about some additional, when we're moving towards that moderate capital level of service, those would address critical items plus the aging infrastructure in poor conditions, culvert repairs, LID facilities, and some water quality and detention pond rehab. We're going to talk just a bit more about these specific master plan and kind of maintenance needs, and then look at some of the proposed rate strategies with and without the use of debt. So we just brought some pictures here to help illustrate some of those capital needs represented in each level of service. Photos for projects completed. Here's an example of maintenance need identified more specifically for each level of service. So as an example of a critical needs project, we can find this in the rear yards of Hazelwood within Coffee Creek. So this area is an area that was prone to flooding issues during storm events. And so fixing that problem sooner rather than later really prevented significant flooding and severe property damage. So those are types of critical projects that would fall really under that baseline scenario. And then increasing our capital funding through the moderate scenario allows the city to complete, again, all master plan projects on the list and then add $300,000 of additional maintenance needs, bringing the maintenance total to $800,000 in this scenario. So that incremental maintenance spend allows the city to tackle projects like a detention pond that isn't functioning as it was intended, that might require a retrofit to improve water quality treatment and address flow control as needed to reduce flooding and maintenance. And then finally, increasing the capital spending to that full level of service allows the city to complete all the known master plan projects, again, similar to the moderate scenario, but would increase annual maintenance funding from that $800,000 annual level to $1.6 million. So essentially doubling that maintenance spend. This increase would satisfy really all the identified maintenance needs and would include projects that address some of those lower priority needs. These are problems that affect smaller areas that, such as opposed to the more region-wide, and really reduce ongoing maintenance requirements. So the full maintenance addresses all items on the O&M list, including things like the decant facility, increased annual disposal fees for sweeper materials, additional fleet outfall rehab, and remaining aging infrastructure that's in poor condition. So with the level of service offerings in mind, we can talk about what that means in terms of rate impacts for each of the scenarios that we just talked about. So first, we're going to look at what those rate impacts look like under the fully cash fund strategy, and then we'll follow up with a little more discussion around the use of debt. So if we were to fully cash fund the baseline scenario, stormwater customers would be looking to increase their monthly stormwater rates between $1.05 per month, increasing it to $1.28 by year 3. So that's moving from a current charge of $10.54 to $14.03 for the baseline. Moving to the moderate capital scenario, that allows, again, for completion of the full master plan with some additional maintenance work, that it would increase the monthly rate for the average bill from $1.63 to $2.18 per month. So moving from $10.54 to $16.24 by year 3. And then finally, that level of service 3, the full capital scenario, would increase monthly rates from $10.54 to $18.67. So an increase of between $2.21 up to $3.24. And we'll bring these all back together again so we can see them kind of side by side. So I know there's lots of numbers here. But so in addition to looking at the fully cash funded options, we really wanted to also look at the use of debt and then talk, just for a minute about the benefits of that. So using debt, we can have some lower near-term rates often that it allows for spreading of those large capital cost components out over multiple years. And it also spreads the cost burden out between existing and future customers. Often with capital projects, also the useful life of those assets can really be long-term. And so using debt helps to match the cost to the useful life of those assets as well. And so these are just some of the top reasons that a utility might take on debt to fund capital projects. So we're going to bring back that same matrix table here to look at the rate impacts of using some debt in each scenario. So in the baseline, stormwater customers will be looking at increasing their monthly stormwater rate from between 74 cents to 84 cents by year 3. So moving from $10.54 to $12.91 in year three. This, though, would require $17.8 million in debt issuances through multiple different issuances throughout the 20-year timeframe. The moderate capital scenario, which allows for completion really again of the master plan and then additional maintenance work, that would mean a $1.26 increase, moving up to a $1.59 increase per month. So going from $10.54 to $14.81 by year three. In this scenario, the moderate capital would require $24.7 million in debt issuances. So again, spread over multiple issuances across the 20-year timeframe. And then finally, the full capital scenario would increase monthly rates from $10.54 to $16.03. So an increase of between $1.58 and $2.09 a month, with $35.6 million in new debt issued over the 20-year horizon. So as I mentioned, we'll bring back the rate impacts all together to start to see some of the differences between the scenarios. And after this, we'll even show a couple of graphs that kind of compare the trajectories for the rates as well. Not surprisingly, the first three results really represent the three levels of service and their rate impacts under the cash funded scenario. And for each of the same level of service offerings, we'll show the debt funded strategy, and you can see that throughout the years that debt funding does have a lower rate impact ultimately to the customer than the fully cash funded versions do. So as I mentioned, in addition to the table here, we wanted to just show the impacts on the graph so we can kind of see where the trajectory goes here in the short term. So while the hybrid approach that uses debt, is cheaper when comparing each similar level of service, I think what you can see from this graph is that using debt allows us really to complete that full capital level of service. So that level of service 3 with customer impacts that are really lower than the moderate level of service under the cash funding scenario. So level of service 3 would end at a cheaper spot than level of service 2 under the cash funding scenario. Of course, with capital funding scenarios, it's often a good idea to kind of look out over the longer term horizon. So this is the same graph looking out over 20 years. And so although debt funding really is the lower cost option up front, once we get past that initial burden of the cash increases, and we're then compounding that revenue, which allows us to levelize rates in the longer term. So eventually that full capital level of service option really becomes equal under both the cash and debt funding scenarios. So it ultimately kind of becomes a question of whether we want to take a bigger hit now and avoid a debt issuance, or use debt to kind of spread those costs a bit more evenly over the long-term timeline. So also of consideration, similar to what we looked at on the SDCs, we'll compare to some neighboring jurisdictions here. Under existing rates, the city's really right in the middle of the pack, with there being quite a bit of variance between the low and the high outliers in the surrounding areas. If the city utilized debt and decided on the baseline level of service, the rate would bump just over Wilsonville on this graph. If the city chooses really any other option, they'd fall between Beaverton and Gladstone with the next rate update. So depending on the scenario agreed upon, the city may move up this chart a bit more in the coming years. But of course, we also don't really know what other cities here are going to be doing with their rates. And it's very likely that they would be increasing on an annual basis as well. So with that, we wanted to just pause here to start to get some questions and feedback from you all on the scenarios. If we want to take another look and kind of have a conversation more about some of those level of service matrices and just get your input on ultimately would the city like to see or what level of service they would like to see move forward with, and whether they would entertain a cash funded option or more of a hybrid approach that utilizes some partial debt funding here.
All right, Commissioner Lau-Smith.
Thank you. So if I read some of your report or staff report or summary, one of those documents correctly, I believe somewhere in there it said that we did not have to ask for regarding the rate increase, but we would have to ask them about debt. Is that correct?
Yes, that's how we understand it. So the rate, yeah, does not apply to stormwater.
Okay, so I guess I'll just say to cut to the chase, I'm leaning toward the level of service to the moderate approach, and and I'm considering the cash funded approach. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm trying to balance what we're doing with water and the fact that we're planning to go to the ballot and ask for rate increases on water. And also asking for debt funding. And then I haven't forgotten about parks, who's on the other hand, and we have not solved that issue yet. And so I'm struggling with saying, okay, we're just going to give, this is no hit on you, John, sorry, but I can't just say we're just going to give Public Works and everything that they need, knowing that we're continuing to ignore parks and not being able to have some balance. So for me, going into the moderate area allows me in my mind, or at least in my brain, to leave some space for us in our budget, or however we're going to weigh all these things. I'm hoping we're leaving some space for a conversation about parks, deferred maintenance, and how we're going to tackle that.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Well, we've had two components to this presentation. The first component on SDCs we haven't even revisited yet. So let's talk about this rate component. What I see is, depending on how you go, that LOS 1, 2, or 3, your percentage increase varies greatly if you just want to say percentages. And some of them, if you play percentages, they're kind of stunning. If you look at us, our rates relative to other communities, they don't seem so bad. The thing that I do want to ask is, early in the presentation, we talked about recommended operating reserves and recommended capital reserves. And there was 350 in terms of 350,000 in terms of operating reserves and 100,000 in terms of capital reserves. And then further down, there's a second chart that says our financial status as of the beginning of 2020 was $1,064,000 in operating. I'll just cut to the relationships. We got 3 times the amount of operating reserves in the bank that we need. And apparently we have 3.3 times the amount of capital reserves that we need. Is that a correct read of this report? Are we financially that solvent that we've got 3 times the recommended amount in both those accounts? And that's probably more a question for our people within Oregon City, not for our consultants.
Well, I can do my best before maybe John jumps in here too. You do have some reserve balances at this point, yes, and I would say they are over those reserves in preparation for capital spending. So it's almost kind of like you were mentioning before in terms of holding. We do have some reserves, and we are factoring that in using those to pull those down to the limits when we need them. And so they're there for capital expenditures like we're planning in the future.
But see, my thought was, if we are so over reserved on this by over 3 times the amount we need, can we use that for some relief to the ratepayers? And I don't think, go ahead.
Oh yeah, and in our forward-looking forecast, we certainly are. And so we are considering that. And so in many years throughout the forecast, we'll see that we would dip down closer to those reserve target balances throughout the long-term forecast. And we'll see those fluctuate, year to year as cash flow changes and our expenses change on the capital side. But we are certainly utilizing those to the full extent that we can while still maintaining those targets.
Okay, and quite honestly, I didn't see that in the calculation, like an offset, a credit for cash on hand, or an overabundance of reserves. So I didn't see that. That's why I'm asking. I'm doing everything I can to minimize the impact on households. I would have liked to have seen that as a stated line item. Other than that, I think the cash funding is. I don't want to fund purely by cash only to not touch those reserves and keep them at such a high level that makes no sense to me, because we all have taken courses on the time value of money, and we know that money is worth less in 4 years than it is today. So should we be using some portion of it to offset costs? And that's the gist of my message. Thanks.
If I could add a little bit.
Certainly appreciate that, and I think, when you're paying, because we don't utilize debt in Oregon City very often for our capital projects, you'll tend to see, an accumulation of cash and then a big spend just related to the cost of the projects that we do anymore. You'll see it in transportation when we bring the budget from, it's save the cash. And then there's a significant spend down on some of these more expensive projects.
Yeah, I was going to add that a lot of the projects in the capital plan, there's smaller projects that we can do, but more often than not, they don't lend themselves to being small. So we try to, save for those and group them and, find all kinds of, pair them with other projects, all kinds of things like that. But there are times when you look at the numbers and it's as if we have a nice fund balance. Why are we asking? But you look at that in another year and it won't be so pretty. So, and it is my understanding that the modeling looks hard at everything we have in the bank, everything that we have in our master plan to date, everything in our current budget, and all that, as it plays out, will be spent down. And I think the only other thing with regard to the cash options is it does then, it will take us time to kind of ramp up those revenues before we, find that right project that's the right phase, to right priority to get done, make sure we got enough. If it's a big project that, several $1 million, then we would have to, save for a couple of years to do that. And that would just kind of like what you're seeing, show a nice fund balance, and then pull that project into a capital project and spend that money down. So good observation, though. Great observation, Commissioner.
Well, and I understand that explanation in terms of the capital reserve portion of the budget. I mean, at some point there's going to be a big draw for a capital project. I get that. Okay, so that's 3 times, but the operational reserves is supposed to be operations. I mean, we've got 3 times as much in that account that is recommended for operational needs. And that's the part that I was trying to possibly use to diminish the impact on ratepayers. I do lean toward the second option myself, but any of the options compared to other cities don't position yourself badly, to be honest.
So we use the operating reserve as well. That's probably, Brooke, you were probably going to say that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We assume that is unrestricted. So we will move it into capital and spend it down carefully to try to mitigate the impacts on rates. So I think, and the other thing I'll add is it is a massive Excel spreadsheet that brings all these different factors together and forecasts the budget. And that's one of the deliverables for our work. You'll see the spreadsheets as an appendix to our report, but we'll also provide the Excel spreadsheet that you're welcome to have a look at. That will show that we track the fund balances and how we draw down that cash again carefully over time.
And again, I understand that, but unlike the SDCs where there's a credit for accumulated SDCs, I didn't see a credit item anywhere for this where we intended to move some money out of this to offset rates. So you're saying we are doing that, and it wasn't visible to me. Thanks.
It shows up differently in the way we model the rates.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
Commissioner McGriff.
Yeah, I appreciate the answer with some of the same questions that I had. And with all due respect, I'm going to leave the brain damage of looking at the spreadsheet to you guys, because I had enough brain damage just reading what I read. So I'm fully supportive of, the fact that we've been doing a pay-as-you-go. So that's kind of how I have to simplify it. I'm not an engineer. A couple of nights ago, that was my area of expertise. So I'm pleased with that. And, we're not currently, having any debt. So I'm also looking for a way to accomplish three things. So looking at how we can get, I will say, most of the master plan projects done, but I also, again, want to see a slower rate increase. And I know sometimes the public will say, well, they're nickel and diming me, but, do they want the $1 increase versus the slam of the $5 increase? And I'm not saying that's what they are. I'm just using that as a scenario. So I guess part of what I was looking at was, kind of not unlike a pitcher of water, a pitcher of storm water. Can we have some achievable results by trying to do that? I'm also very cognizant of the fact that we're going to need to do some major overhauling to our parks SDCs. And, again, we had asked a question in our most recent survey: would our community support some sort of additional I guess I'll use the word tax to help us catch up because we're so far behind. So I guess and maybe it's in here, but the cash basis versus a debt basis. And I think Brooke was saying, what I was trying to find was, what are the implications to the ratepayers? I see what it is on the cash, but what are the implications not only to the ratepayer, but also in terms of interest we'd have to pay or other obligations that come with carrying debt service? And I'm not saying debt service is wrong. There are cases where, it's entirely appropriate to use it. And I'm used to, looking at things that deal with debt service. So I guess that's part of my question. And, after, like I said, after looking at all these charts and things and then highlighting stuff and doing some math on the sidebars, I'm kind of there. So I said here, would it appear that there is a more gradual rate increase with debt, but what would the payments be or interest versus no debt? So that's something I wrote in understanding. I wrote this maybe about 10 o'clock last night. So, and then I had a question we talked about rate credits on page 13 of the report, and it talked about a stormwater customer. So I'm assuming, I don't know what the definition of a stormwater customer is. Is that the developer, or is that the individual customer like me, or who that is? And I think I'll just stop at that because my brain's already starting to go, okay, get the first answer and then you can move on. So thank you.
I'll let Brooke take the debt question, but the stormwater question, who's a customer? It's not the developer. It's really the owner of the property after developed. Obviously we've got customers that have undeveloped property that pay a stormwater fee as well. But I think what we're talking about here is the ratepayer who gets a monthly utility bill that would include all the utility bills, including stormwater. And Brooke, do you have I think what we're hearing there is what is the cost of indebtedness, right?
Yeah, and so ultimately, I think that's where that kind of longer term comes into play a bit. So, we've certainly factored the interest cost within the analysis that we've done. And so the rates that you're comparing include that interest cost. And so it does mean that we can hold the rates to the ratepayers lower, certainly within the near term. And ultimately, when we look over that 20-year period is where we might start to see that the interest is going to come into play a little bit more. So while we might be able to to levelize rates for the cash funded option in the future a little bit sooner. That's where we'd have to maybe hold rates higher in the long term just to pay for that interest. So that's where we start to see those lines kind of converging over the long term, is really when we look out over that 10 or 20-year time frame. The debt funded option, though, doesn't reach a point where it actually crosses over the line for the cash funded option. So it doesn't become more expensive ultimately in the long term. It just means that we may need to hold rates slightly higher in the longer term outlook to make up for that difference, since
So
we're not increasing them quite as high in the beginning.
So then the interest rates is that on the open market or is that in the bond market?
Yeah, when we plan for
fluctuate.
when we planned for the revenue bond issuances, we did assume revenue bonds, and we assumed a 4% interest rate for each issuance. So, you know, we're likely staying a little bit conservative compared to what we're seeing today, and you know, likely into the future. There's certainly some variability there, but then also we would expect that this isn't kind of a set it and forget it sort of a strategy, that we'd be coming back to look at this every few years to see really where we're at and make adjustments as needed there.
So Tony, one last question. Why hasn't the city, I thought in the past the city had utilized some debt for these types of projects, but it seems like in the near term or in the last few years, the city has shied away from them. It kind of makes sense, knowing some past history, but what has our history been with this, and why haven't we been doing it?
That's a great question. I mean, obviously we did for the facilities that we built, obviously police department, library. Boy, I don't remember the last time we went to a vote for infrastructure debt. I'm not sure we've done it since I've been here. I don't have a good answer to you. I think it's just always historically been that we save up the cash and then we do the project just because of the uncertainty related around going to the vote in order to get the approval to take on the debt. I don't really know another answer other than
I don't think it's been since you've been here for sure.
Oh, sorry. If I may,
Go ahead,
it is pretty common for stormwater utilities to cash fund capital projects because they, you know, debt is best used when you have a really big project that's just going to cause too much of a rate spike, and it makes sense to spread that cost over time. While that does make sense with stormwater projects, compared to water and sewer, they're generally less expensive, and you know, a lot of them in this case are repair and replacement, and so that lends itself better to cash funding than a number of debt issues, except for being able to spread those costs over time. So you know, we looked at this, and I would say sometimes when you look at cash versus debt, the differences are so striking. It's obvious that you should put it out for a vote and try to get, you know, these didn't seem that dramatically different from our sort of compared to what we've seen in some places. So I'll just throw that out there for your consideration too.
And Brooke, I might have missed it. In the rate assumptions, is that in moving after the year 3? Are we just tying it to inflation on the increases?
Largely, they'd be inflationary thereafter. Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Loudsmith.
I think so. Yeah, I just another quick comment. When I was thinking about the debt piece and going to the voters, and Denise, your question about whether or not we've done it or why has it been so long. And if I'm thinking about my messaging in the voter pamphlet, I feel like I can sell water and I feel like I can sell parks. I don't feel like I can sell debt on stormwater. Sorry, John, I know it's your passion, but you know, if I'm just trying to weigh and I have to pick one, and I know that parks is hanging out there, and like I said, and we already have a plan set for water. I'm afraid of loading the plate too heavy on the ballot for debt. And if there's a decent option here to continue cash funding for stormwater and still meet a lot of our master plan projects and stuff like that, I just kind of, again, I'm just trying to balance them and what I think we can be successful with.
I didn't say I supported it. I was asking questions. And I would have to say in answer to that, it's going to be a we. I tend to go with it, at least with everything I read and everything, all my notes, I tend to go with the LOS 2 with the cash basis, but that's based on everything that I've read. And so I will get through this with all their really great information that is synthesizing it down to make a final decision when we have to make that final decision. So, but I look forward to our discussion and our decision.
Yeah, sorry if I was implying that I was carrying the load. It was the proverbial, we all have to sell this, and I'm thinking about it me personally. And you all should be thinking about it you personally too, because people are going to ask you what you think and why are we doing this. So yeah, sorry, I did internalize that. But yes, this is a city commission vote.
So I tend to agree with most of the comments from the other commissioners tonight. I would like to see us between LOS 2 and 3, although we may not be able to necessarily go that far, but and then definitely leaning more towards the cash funded option for the reasons stated this evening as well. But I'm open for that discussion to continue. But I think it looks like we're all kind of centering around the 2 range. If I'm hearing everyone correctly, and have some flexibility in discussing that, I guess, as we go on. But I guess that gives you probably enough of what you're looking for this evening. Is there?
I think it helps. I heard a lot of consistency there with the answers and a lot of the same concerns we have
Right.
about trying to maintain. All these utilities are important, and by the way, Commissioner Smith, I'm passionate about all of them as well. But stormwater is a resource that's important too, for sure. But I appreciate hearing consistency. The debt thing, I understand it, because from a staff's perspective, the idea of complying with the charter, getting it through, finding people as passionate about the idea as we are to actually sell it, because we don't get to sell, we don't get to go out and kind of convince the public of the needs there. So it's not only us finding, who's that advisory pack, or that person, that champion for utility is hard. And so I understand that. I really appreciated hearing from John about the fact that for stormwater, it probably makes a little less sense than some of our other utilities, and I agree with that. So I think we've got good direction. We'll be bringing this back. Commissioner O'Donnell, you mentioned, and I think you're right, the SDC piece. We didn't really get back to that, and we need to get back to that because that requires public notification, and we want to accomplish that in a reasonable amount of time. So would like to hear if there's consensus around what to do with those. So Brooke, I don't know if you can bring up those options again.
Yeah, John, before we jump, Commissioner Smith, I'm not sure if Commissioner McGriff's hand was new, or
I think
before we
it's
jump
new.
off of this subject.
Yeah, it's a new hand up, I think.
Yeah, it's not SDCs. We can get there, but just for my fellow commissioners' edification, since we got this information in our packet, I had no less than 4 conversations with members of the public about stormwater, and I was explaining as best I could that the issues we were going to be struggling with were how to keep up with the infrastructure, and explaining to the public what our infrastructure deficiencies were. And I said, it's not one of those things that you always think about, but when it rains and the water comes off your roof, it's going somewhere. So you have to recognize it's not like turning on your tap or the other utilities that we have. It's a little bit different, but it's there because we are trying to protect our environment. And I phrased it from that standpoint. I said, we do not want our stormwater going into our sewer system. We want the stormwater to get treated and go back into the Willamette or the Clackamas or whatever creek it's coming in out of. So I understand, you know, what we are going to be faced with. And I told those three members of the public that we were going to look very seriously at how to help us make the improvements that we need to make our town better and more livable, but that it does come at a cost. It's not free. And we were going to try to mitigate as much as we could at this point. But I think the other thing that maybe didn't get emphasized when I was reading this is I thought about, okay, so if we do debt service, what is the time and materials that our staff is going to have to spend to deal with that? And so I was thinking, and there's Matt's name in the corner. I said, oh, I wonder how much additional work that's going to be. Well, I don't need the answer to that question because we're kind of all in agreement. So it seems like it might be a dull topic, but I will tell you this, that people are really interested in what we're doing, because I got asked, you know, what are you working on next? I said stormwater, and they said, tell me about it. So I did.
All right. SDCs.
Would you like us to bring back the SDC slide, or were there just some thoughts and comments that would be helpful?
It'd be great if you'd put it back up.
Commissioner Lyle Smith.
Yeah, I thought this was such a small increase. If I remember right, it was $50 to $100. I thought that was pretty minimal considering all of our other STC increases after a study. So I was comfortable moving this one forward.
I think it was a little over 100. I want to say
114.
114 or something like that. Yeah. I know we talked to the development group this morning, and Laura's development group, and I think they were pleasantly surprised, maybe not pleased, but they had just heard the water rate change. So yeah. The question in my mind here is are you supportive if we put the notice out, publish the report, go through the 90-day notification period, bring this back on July 7th with $114 SDC increase effective July 1? Or no, wouldn't be effective July 1. Effective whenever we can get it effective, but after that hearing meeting. I see one yes. I see.
Good with that. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Yeah, I'll chip in here. I still struggle with the fact that that they get credit for $100,000 or whatever's in the bank already from a previous SDC to fund some project somewhere, that in my mind gets allocated this and goes unfunded, but maybe that's my lack of understanding. Other than that, I'll do some of John's work for him. You know, this increase represents 0.4%. And when Ms. Turway sent us an example of what the SDCs, our total SDCs only impact a house cost, at least the example she gave, of about 5%. So I don't see this as a big stumbling block. I'm fine with going with it. Thanks.
Commissioner McGriff.
I just wanted to ask a question about, so if we take the existing SDCs and we add the 2 increases, what do we generally, you can give me a round number, doesn't need to be exact, in terms of what the overall cumulative effect is going to be. I'm not insensitive to, the concerns that the development community has, and I apologize, I had to miss the meeting this morning. Tree issues took precedent. So I'm looking at it from the standpoint of what we talked about earlier and then our support for this modest increase. So when I get asked about it, it's kind of where I'm going with my question. And I think that might be a John question.
Let me, I need to pull that up.
Is that in combination with the water that we looked at? Okay, I can look at,
Yes,
for
John,
that
yeah,
too, John.
both Johns, yes. Yeah, the combination of the water, then what we have for transportation, what we have for parks, so. So I'm assuming it includes in the chart here, that's everything together.
If I can chip in, I remember Ms. Turway sent us a representative charges SDCs. We could actually add whatever increases in and come up with a new total. Previously, our SDCs were about just under 30,000 for everything. And I don't know what the addition is, and that would, whatever we increased, we could add that to that.
So I can, thank you. I can, so we've got an effective SDC total for water, sanitary sewer, storm, and parks for a single family home, single family residence today of $36,685. That doesn't include the water increase, but this increase would obviously change that by $114. And then the water was, just under, it was like $4,600 more, I think, in that range.
That sounds right. I was gonna say 4,500.
Yeah.
I got
already.
3,799, not counting the number you just gave, so.
And it depends if, yeah, I had it at current 6,692, including the South Fork, to 11,724. So just over 5,000, including South Fork. But yeah, just over 5,000.
And then if we
For
don't
water.
include South Fork,
It's the same because we're assuming the South Fork stays the same in both cases. So a little over 5,000 for water, plus the 114 for stormwater.
So that would, if we move to 41,800 as a total, that's like a 14% rate increase.
Well, I think it's important when you start talking about SDCs, if you look at that document that Ms. Turway sent us, there's a number of pass-through SDCs that are not ours. We are collecting on behalf of others, namely the school district, state surcharges. There's a number. There's about $4,000 in fees that we collect on behalf of others.
yeah, thank you. I'm not uncomfortable with the number. Like I said, I just want to have a round number so when I get asked the question, I can be knowledgeable and I don't like to be in a position of totally defending it, but I want to be able to give information and let whoever's asking me the question make their mind up. So I am in agreement with my fellow commissioners who've already spoken with regard to going ahead and doing the 90-day notice.
I can, for all of you, we can mark up the effective rates with the changes that you're talking about here with the water and stormwater and send that out.
The email that Commissioner O'Donnell's referring to from Ms. Turway was forwarded to the commission on January 30th. It's a cost of a home permit, and it breaks down those fees, building permit fee, plan review fee, SDCs, pass through state surcharge, pass through metro construction excise tax, pass through school district construction excise tax. And that came to 39,677 on an assumed value of a home, a little over 2,300 square foot, which sold for just under 595,000. So if you'd like me to resend that, I can certainly do that. Or if you search on January 30th, it'll be there.
All right.
Have it, thanks.
Okay, anything else on this topic? All right.
Commissioner President Smith, did you
Go
say
ahead.
okay? Did you say okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
The brain damage has already been done, John.
I know.
City manager report tonight or no?
I have no updates unless the commissioner has any questions.
I think we're good. So unless there's anything else.
I just wanted to say that I received 3 personal emails today thanking us for the storm debris thing again. So just want to pass that on to my other commissioners.
Yes, we're getting a lot of that, and we heard the also the voicemail from citizens today as well. So I think everyone appreciates it. All right.
Mr. Lewis has his hand up.
Since you brought up yard debris, I wanted to mention one other thing that we're floating out there, which is a helping community event with the Optimist in the city. And I heard today we've got somewhere around 29 calls for help, and we've got a pretty short list of folks that have volunteered. So we're worried a little bit about that. We'll do a push yet next week to try and get more folks to help, but we're way out pacing the folks with needs than what we have for folks who can help. So just kind of on the 20th.
If they want to volunteer, call your office.
It's on the website. There's a way to do that. There's a phone number, and I don't have it in front of me right now, but anybody quicker than me that can get that?
What is the day, John? It's the
20th.
20th? Okay.
Yeah.
So
I think
if you go to our city's website, on the homepage under news and announcements, on March 20th is our community cleanup sign up for volunteers or request services. It's for residents within Oregon City. Meeting at 8 a.m. at the end of the Oregon Trail on March 20th. And
Are they hauling to the cove?
they will not be. We've got another site for those volunteers so that they don't get hung up in the traffic. So just for clarity, I wish I had that number, but I'm not finding it right now. But yeah, there's another number, or you can sign up online. And the event is on the 20th. We're going to open the dump site at the Cove on the 19th, the 20th, and the 21st. So 2 different things.
Guaranteeing no rain?
I wish I had that power. So anyway, we're hopeful that the community event is a success. We haven't done something like that in a while, but it's really pairing people up with some kind of resource like a truck and trailer and helpful hands to help those who are really in need, that have tree debris in their yard that needs to be hauled. Kind of like that pile that's sitting behind my shoulder there.
Mm-hmm.
We can get it, if we can get them to sign up, get it to the curb, that's helpful for sure.
Is the city considering at all another weekend other than the 19th, 20th, and 21st?
I've heard that we need to be considering it. So we haven't set a date yet, but we're trying to balance that a little bit. Yeah, we just got the bill for the wood chipper, by the way. That was about $100,000. So yeah, that's a big effort, and running it on the weekend is a challenge because we got other needs with our staff. But I suspect we'll do at least one more date. Tony's been twisting my arm pretty hard on that. So.
Oh, I think the number of people signing up for help is an indication that all you have to do is kind of walk around, pick your neighborhood, every neighborhood. My neighborhood, I got 2 piles in my backyard that I still have yet to find a trailer or a truck or something to put them in. So, I'm no different. It's everywhere. And I just cannot see how it's, going to be done on the 19th, 20th, and 21st. And I've received lots of requests for probably another weekend. So I know you're going to monitor that weekend and see how full and how packed it is. And the partnership with Optimist Club sounds great. I mean, clearly there's still a lot of need out there.
We have a lot of elderly people who have yard, they can't do it.
Yeah.
And I hope we can get the word out to them. I mean, that would be my priority. I've got stuff in my yard, but it can wait. I mean, I'm able-bodied. I can get it to go away somewhere, but my little old 80-year-old neighbor doing one stick at a time out to the curb, she's just not going to handle it very well. So.
Yep.
All right, this is the absolute last chance. Any one last thing that anyone wants to say? Come, are you sure?
Till next Wednesday.
All right, we're adjourned for tonight. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thanks,
Good night.
everybody.